Chris, can she hear us?
Hello.
Hello, can you hear us?
I can hear somebody.
That's Louise. This is Louise.
Hi, Louise. It says H. Bailey.
I know, that's Heath. He's facilitating all of this.
Oh, very good.
I'm here. Some people haven't shown up yet, but and there's a faculty member, Amanda Hickey, who's probably going to be signing in from a different location.
Great. Okay, can you see me?
Can we turn her up?
Can you see me?
I'm sorry, what?
Can you see me?
Yes.
Okay. Can you hear me? It sounds like not so well.
Yes,
we can hear you.
We just turned up the volume.
What a concept. Okay.
Hi, Chris. This is Bev.
Hello, Bev. I could tell that was you.
And this is Karen.
Karen, hello.
Hi, nice to see you.
So we have Karen, have you heard me in one of those previous?
Yes. I came when you were here upstairs.
Yes.
And I also took, a little while ago, I took a 2-session program that you did over on the other side of Keene. I can't remember the organization it was with.
Oh, with SCORE?
Yes.
Great. And forgive me, I see and hear so many people that I can't keep up.
Oh, no,
Yeah, no.
goodness. I was one of many in that class. It was a great class.
Oh, good. We're doing that again in April sometime. It's a 2-parter on a Saturday morning.
I will recommend it to people.
Oh, thank you. So what's
Chris,
your total?
Are you in Florida right now?
Sorry?
Are you in Florida right now?
Sorry to say, not quite. I'm in Georgia. Right up, I'm in Savannah, Georgia.
Nice. Is it warm there?
It is warm today. Yesterday was chilly and rainy, but I won't even go there because it's all relative.
Well, it's sunny here.
It's sunny, and is it stinking cold?
No, it's 34, and it's sun is reflecting off of all the ice.
Yeah, it's icy. I live a little bit south of here in Richmond, and I live in a kind of a hollow, like up in a hill and down in a valley.
Yep.
So any way I come, I've got hills up and hills down. But once I get on the out of my driveway and off my first hill, it's usually fine. So.
But yeah, I suppose at 34 degrees, things are freezing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and maybe melting too.
Melting, freezing, yeah, I'm sorry. I am here till the end of February. I do this every year for at least the month of February, just so.
Nice.
If I was in New Hampshire, I'd be taking hostages about now. And my husband realizes that and takes me here.
Now that is a new level of season affective disorder.
Yes, that's
right. Okay, you have raised the bar. Thank you.
I have raised the bar, taking hostages. And just so you know, I'm from Minnesota, and if you were watching the Super Bowl, that's what I'm used to.
Yeah. Pretty. I have family there, so.
Yeah, 4 degrees yesterday and 36 below wind chill, and so New Hampshire is better.
Yeah, but Georgia's even more better.
Way more better. Way more better. So we have Bev and Karen and Louise, and anybody else?
Diana, who is a student worker in our office, is going to be joining us.
Great.
I invited her along,
And
she's a senior who's looking for jobs, so.
And we have another student intern, Stephanie, who may be joining us as well.
Okay, and the other faculty who was remotely, maybe?
Yes, Amanda Hickey is her name.
Oh, somebody just tuned in, and Emma. I'm assuming that's Amanda.
Her.
Is there an Amanda? Oh, let's see. Amanda, can you hear us?
Yes. Can you hear
great.
me?
I can hear you.
Perfect.
And Chris,
Yeah.
Amanda teaches she teaches many courses, but she's teaching the capstone for health sciences students. So I've been working with her and another professor on how the capstone students can be using LinkedIn as a portfolio.
Yep.
And so some of the samples, some of the links that we sent you are from some of their students.
Oh, excellent. Okay. So let's say we got Amanda, and maybe that's all for now, and we could get going. And if anybody else joins, I'll hear about it.
Yes.
Yeah, Diana just came.
And she's going to get her laptop so she can be looking at her LinkedIn account.
Oh, great. And is Heath himself also learning, or is he just your tech guy?
He's lurking.
He's here.
And learning. Okay, good. Well, why don't I plunge ahead and just so you, some housekeeping items. See if you can locate the chat box, which is a place where you could all type questions if I'm in the middle of saying something and you want to say something.
Yes.
Well, that's a useful tool, but because there are not so many of you all at once, as you can tell, your microphone is open and you could just shout it out when the time comes. So I don't usually have the microphone open for a bunch of different students because it gets to be too confusing. But use the chat or just say it and I'll hear it. If you're all using one computer or are near it, I can hear you. Okay, make sense?
Yes.
Okay, and same with you, Amanda, wherever you are, just talk to your computer and I'll hear it.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
All right, and this entire thing is being recorded and I can send you a link to that video later this afternoon. It takes a little while to propagate, but you would all have it for review. If it's such scintillating stuff, you have to review it later. Know that you'll have that file forever.
Ooh.
Okay? Is there questions on that?
No.
Okay. Well then, I'm gonna plunge forth, and again, you folks get to drop in, ask questions whenever, but here's what I think we're doing today. First, I have to get the chat box off my screen. There you go. I want to go through the parts of a standard LinkedIn profile. You all know this by now, I think, but going through those parts and taking that each opportunity to say what I noticed in the student profiles you sent me, if it relates to those parts, okay? And then towards the end, I'll give you some miscellaneous comments and things that I noticed and some best practices I've learned about LinkedIn. And at that point, discussion, I'd like to hear from you folks, the career counselor types, back at me to see how this relates to what you know about the hiring process these days, because I am certainly removed from that. I might be a LinkedIn expert, but I'm not a hiring manager. So you probably have things you might want to point out and help me understand. And then at the end, Louise sent me her tip sheet. And it was remarkably similar to a tip sheet that LinkedIn provides to people. And I went through that and added some of my own comments that I think I'll just send to you rather than go through it here, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Okay. And similarly, I did go through each and every one of those student profiles and made comments in a Word document, and I will send that to you at the end, because there will be things that I'll miss or will just forget about or whatever. So I did go through each and every one of them, and I think there was a total of 9. Okay, sound good?
Yes. Yes.
All right. And then each one of the profiles that you sent me had a resume attached at the top. And I did not open those nor go through them. Simply, I'm not a resume expert, and I didn't want it to muck up my thinking about what I was seeing on LinkedIn. But I think that's great that they all included the resumes, and that's a good practice. Okay?
Yes. Yeah.
All right, moving on then. So is there anything I missed that you all want to be sure to cover before the end of this?
No.
So far, okay. And you might have thoughts on that at the end too. Could I do this and that after we hang up, okay? So on a student profile, anybody's profile on LinkedIn, the 3 top elements of it in order of importance are the profile photo, the headline, and the summary. And we're going to go through those 3 first, okay? And you all who heard me before have heard me whine about profile photos. They're really easy to do badly, and you sent me 9 of them, and I would say not one did it badly. They're all pretty darn good. I'm going to show you each one of them on the next slide. Emily here is fuzzy, and that's only because of the way I blew her up. It's not her fault. So that's a profile photo, and that's what we'll be talking about. So the standard practices, the must-dos are always be smiling. No exceptions, okay, in the profile photo. And you're going to see, I think, none of the ones you sent me were not smiling, but you will find people doing that because they want to look serious and professional. And no, that's not the way to do it. A photo should always be smiling because as humans, we relate to a smiling face. And if you're a hiring manager, you want to relate to that person, right? So always smiling, no exceptions. And this is the one I have a lot of fun with in the workshops. Never include other people, your spouse, your BFF, no hats, no drinks, no pets, no other distractions in that photograph. Because if it distracts the person, their brain is going to go somewhere else instead of focusing on you, the applicant. And always just pretty simple, look professional and clear. That's what the main goal is. So here's all 9 of the ones you sent me. And you'll see I gave a couple of them A+. A couple of them, and the rest are kind of fine, just fine, and a couple I have questions about, or we should talk about. So that Adele up at the top, Colton, those are the 2 A+, really wonderful profile photos, clear and sharp and smiling. And Adele's got a little bit of background there that's giving her context, which is interesting but not distracting. Casey and Emily, fine, fine. Amanda, fine. And then over on the, I think that would be your left-hand side as well. Rachel and Mary have got something going on behind their profile photos. The backgrounds to themselves, are somewhat distracting in that the viewer is going to go, what is that? Or they would just be stopped in their tracks to say, what is behind Rachel? Particularly Rachel. Rachel, I figured it out after a while, she's standing in front of a poster that I think is in a clinic, and it's a half-naked woman probably having a breast exam or something like that, totally appropriate for the context. But if I'm the hiring manager looking at Rachel, I'm going, what is that behind her? So that's kind of basic photography skills 101. Pay attention to what's behind the subject. Mary there is not so drastic, but there is stuff going on where you just go, what's going on? Everybody else there is really well done, I think. Over in on the right-hand side, I cut off this woman's name, but it's with Keene State College above her. And Nicholas, they both have, so that thing behind the profile photo is called a banner photo or a cover photo. It's okay not to have that. Most adults I know do not fill in that part of their profile. Casey and Emily up at the top did not do that. That's just fine. The thing that you're seeing there, the blue connector thingies, that's just the default if you don't fill in that banner photo. But there we have Nicholas and the other woman whose name is coming up, I'm sorry. I asked you what you think about that banner behind each person. Nicholas has got a stock photography of a business meeting. And my response to that is, yeah, not so much, because it's stock photography. And frankly, those people, I don't know, where do you see people in New Hampshire wearing three-piece suits? They don't look like real people. It looks like stock photography. The woman with the Keene State College on the background, I'm not certain about that. It's probably okay now, but as she goes out into the work world, maybe Keene State College isn't the end all and be all of her being, and she should maybe have that be something different or just blank. What do you think about that?
Well, yeah, I have a question about that. So Georgia is looking to work in higher ed.
Georgia,
and so part of maybe her brand, and she has been extremely active. She's been a real student leader at the college. So in that scenario, does that work?
Actually, yeah, thank you, Bev. That was Bev, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that totally does work. You're right. And she did say in her profile she wants to work in higher ed, so that probably is totally appropriate for her.
Mhm.
Let's pretend she was a regular old person who wants to be a nurse. Then it might be a little too tied to my youthful years in college, sort of thing. Right?
Mhm.
Yeah, and I would imagine, like, as soon as she gets a job, that background photo is going to change.
Yes, and that would be great. Recommend that happened. What do you think about Nicholas and my snarky comments there?
I see your point. You know, Nick, he wants to ultimately work at he's from New York area. I think he's from Westchester County, and ultimately he wants to work in New York City. He wants to Fortune 500. He's a real powerhouse.
Yeah.
But I hear what you're saying about the stock photo, though.
Mhm.
Yep. I use stock photos all the time, but I'm just always very mindful about what those people look like and do they relate to what you're trying to do. If this guy's going to New York and he lives in Westchester County, he gets a pass on that.
Phew.
Yeah, and you can tell them that. No, and the rest, you know, that don't have profile, I mean, that banner behind you, if a student asked you, I would absolutely say it doesn't really matter. But I could see it being a place where they could show their personality a little bit or show kind of a story about what they've done. Now, Colton there in the middle, he's a health science student, but he's got a photography background, so he's showing what I presume are some of his photographs.
Yep.
Yeah.
That are nicely done photographs. So if that's what if he intends to incorporate that in his future work life, that's not a bad photo to have, background photo.
I like the hand washing.
That's,
Health sciences.
and Mary Gilbar, she's got fruits and vegetables behind her, and how appropriate is that for a nutrition student? So that's really great, I think.
Mhm.
All right, continuing here. Where's my button? So again, the banner back there is a close-up of Colton's. I guess it's bubble blowing, not hand washing, but it still works, doesn't it? And he's got some really great photos there. Again, not required, but it is a great way to tell the story. And as you're about to learn, telling the story is kind of what people are recommending these days in your personal branding, to tell the story. And that leads me to the headline section of the profile. So the headline in the profile is the thing right under a person's name. In this case, in Colton's case, senior nutrition major at Keene State, which is absolutely a factual statement. And I would just recommend that each and every one of the ones that you sent me and the people that you advise include something factual and a little more. This is a great place to reveal a little bit of personality and a little bit of what they hope to do with that education that they're getting. And let me give you some examples of that coming up. There's mine, which is certainly not the end all and be all, but I try to, and I'm not looking for employment, I'm looking for freelance jobs, contracts, projects like this one here that I'm doing for you. So I just said who I am and added a little something to it to reveal my personality. So for your students, I would recommend seeing how they could make that work for them. Go a little bit beyond, I'm a senior nutrition major. I'm a senior nutrition major who hopes to also add juggling in the future, or something like that, that gives a little bit of who they are and what they hope to accomplish right there in that first, I'm going to go back a sec, right there in that first line, going backwards again, a little bit something more. Sorry, go ahead.
Question. So Louise and I we run these workshops for the students, and we talk about like aspiring nutritionists, or like what they want to become, aspiring
Entrepreneur.
public relations
Yes.
coordinator or something like that. What is your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think I had that sample, or it's in my comments to the profiles. Somebody in your group did say something like that, and I think that's an excellent way to do it. Aspiring something, and hope to do it in the great state of New Hampshire, or something like that.
Mhm.
Anything you could add that's a little bit personality, but yeah, aspiring is a great word, and a great great place to include that would be in that headline, I think.
Okay,
Yeah, so we're on the same track there.
good.
So that leads me to the next section called the summary. And in my live in-person workshops, I spend a lot of time focusing on that summary. It's so very important because, as you all know, we have no attention spans these days, and it may be the only part of your LinkedIn profile that might be read. And it should encapsulate a lot and not be duplicative of the resume, since all these folks had the resume attached, and not duplicative of a cover letter if any are sending those these days. But in a way, it's kind of like a cover letter. So here's Emily's. And by the way, my comments will sound snarkier than they would be if I was meeting with these people in person. But I wanted to pass on my thoughts. So here is Emily, who goes along for almost a paragraph, and I'm asleep by the end of the first sentence. It's it's job speak. It's not very interesting, written in an interesting way. It's sort of standard issue in terms of what you would put in a cover letter or the first paragraph of a cover letter or in that resume. So I got bored. That may be just me. It may be that hiring managers put up with it more than I would. So take that for what it's worth. In my other life, I'm a creative writer and editor, so I'm paying attention to those types of things. But to say these same kinds of things that all 9 of your students could have written, to say it in a more interesting way and punchy way, it would be something I would advise people to attempt to do, or you to advise them to do. Again, here's mine. Mine is a little too short and maybe doesn't give enough information about me, but I'm in a point in my career, it doesn't matter. I wanted to get my personality out there more than what I want to do in real life, sort of thing. So think of that space as a place to do something more interesting. Don't use that space to give them your name once again, as Mary did. Your name is already attached to the profile or everything else this person has sent to that potential employer. She doesn't need to use it in that section again. I'm sure that you'd gone through this with all of your students. Anybody you're advising, spelling, grammar count a lot, right? So I noticed lots and lots of errors in that summary section, and just jumping ahead a little bit, lots of errors in the experience section where people are describing what they did with previous jobs. Have you noticed that? And is that a challenge for you folks as advisors?
All the time.
Yes, in a word.
All the time. I mean, so I taught social media to students 3-4 years ago. I was an adjunct, and the level of grammar and spelling at the senior year was frankly appalling to me. And if they don't reach it then, by their senior year, they're not going to get there. So they're going to need you to guide them. You will see in my individual analysis of the profiles, several of them were really, really atrocious. And I don't know if what you sent me was final for them, or you're still in the process of advising them. But I don't need to tell you higher ed folks, spelling and grammar count, right?
Yeah.
What is this? She had good aspiration there. Oh, there it was. That was her first sentence. That's just an example of what not to do, right? That's one sentence. Yeah. You need to break that up a little bit and be clearer about what she means. Clearer in her own mind, so that when she writes it, it will come out clearer. Here's one. Rachel had that good she's including a little bit of storytelling in her summary, which is really good. This experience made me realize I want to work with children. I think that's the kind of personal branding, storytelling that resonates with the hiring managers. Give me a clue as to why you're here, why you're doing this, why you want to do this for a living, what caused you to be passionate about this topic. And in fact, talking to these students about their passion behind them might get them to a point where they can write about it in a more interesting and storytelling way. Georgia, again, she too does pretty well at a little bit of storytelling. I'm a first generation American. I strive to put forth my best efforts. I have a unique perspective. That's a little bit beyond, I want to become a nutritionist. I want to become a nurse. And it gives me a little clue into her as opposed to what she wants to be. Okay. Here's Nicholas, our friend who's going off to New York. As a management major, I'm intrigued about how businesses are managed and how the businesses work. I think that's excellent. An excellent statement for him to be making in what he wants to do with his world, with his job in the future. What makes a firm successful? Really excellent. But this is a guy further down in his profile, in his experiences. It was clear to me how you cut and pasted it from websites. You know, jobs that he held, he cut and pasted what he did in those jobs from the job listing. And it was just not in human language. So those are things to look out for, and I think we'll come back to that again. Anyway, those were the first three top important elements of profile photo. Are there anything you want to ask me about what I've said so far?
No, that's helpful.
Okay. Is this stuff you didn't know already or have had problems with?
Oh, you know what? I do have a question. The summary, I see sometimes, usually they're pretty short, one paragraph. Sometimes I see them go on to 2 paragraphs.
Yeah.
What is your opinion?
Yeah, shorter is always better.
Yeah.
I think if you go beyond a paragraph, you're probably losing that person.
I think so too.
Yep. And it's you probably know this. It's harder to make shorter.
Yeah.
And get those. It has to be really, really clear and succinct and to the point like that. And then add some personality, as I've just said. Shorter is better. So I would spend a lot of time rewriting if I was an actual job applicant, rewriting that section, or in your case, advising people how to do that. Yeah. Short. Mine was 3 sentences, I think. Is that right? All right. Anything else on those top 3 elements?
Chris, what about like bulleting, you know, the key skills that you're bringing, or is
Yeah.
that something for the summary, or should it be further down?
I think it would be great to do in a summary, and I don't think LinkedIn lets you. I think it doesn't have that formatting built in.
You can copy and paste from a Word and pull up the bullets from the Word document and put it into LinkedIn.
Oh, great. You've had that experience then. So
Yes.
I would give it a try. But again, going back to linked, not so it goes on so far that you've gone below the top of the fold, as it were, on the page. Yeah, keep that short as well. And bullets, in the experiences section of the profiles that are reviewed, were often missing and could have been a much more effective way to present some of the experiences. So I would do that.
Okay, thanks.
All right, moving on. So one of the key things I found missing everywhere was recommendations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? Have you had these conversations with your students?
Yes.
Yes.
And what kind of response do you get from them when you point that out to them?
I think they're going to get on it.
Okay.
You know, especially for the seniors, they're going to need references. They might be asking people to write letters of recommendations. So I think they get it, and I think they're at the beginning phase of understanding it.
Yeah. Oh, good, Bev.
Yeah.
So
And again, we told them just short, one paragraph.
one paragraph. I'm going to show you a couple of samples from mine, and I hope that they aren't taking the lazy way of doing these endorsements that you've heard me whine about. Endorsements are
Yeah, they
almost
mean nothing.
meaningless to people.
They really are.
I hate endorsements.
They should have gotten rid of those with the redesign.
we had that conversation last fall when I was in front of you folks. I do.
Well, here we are, still complaining.
We still harbor bitterness about the endorsements.
You haven't listened to us. What's wrong with that? Get rid of those endorsements. But I could see students being lazy and just saying, well, the endorsements are good enough. I got a couple of those. But no. Make sure they're getting recommendations. And it's built right in there. It's easy to do, as you can see. Ask to be, if I went to my profile, as opposed to you seeing my profile, I get this thing right here that says ask to be recommended. I press that button and I can pick from my contacts. Oh, Janice should really write me an endorsement. I mean, a recommendation. So short, look at this top guy here. He gave me one sentence. It doesn't look like much, but this guy has such cachet that that's going to carry a lot of weight. And that's whoa, sorry. Am I making you dizzy yet? Okay. So there, and look, there's Bev. But endorsements, recommendations carry so much weight. I don't have to tell you this with hiring managers, and it could be from a professor that they worked with a lot, right? It doesn't have to be employers. Am I correct?
Right, yes, exactly.
No. So really crank them up on that as they head towards graduation. Absolutely.
Just one comment on that, because I had the experience where someone asked me for a recommendation, and I did not realize at the time that I only knew about the endorsements.
Oh,
So,
yep.
so I endorsed them rather than writing a recommendation because I wasn't aware of that. So it might be good for students to clarify that with people.
The process of finding how to write the recommendation, that's a little tricky.
It is.
Yeah.
Yep. And so,
can you review that when the slideshow's done?
yes. Yeah. Let's try to get there. Yeah. When we're done, we'll go to my profile specifically and see how to do that. And I'm not sure who was first speaking. Was that Karen?
Karen, yeah.
That was Karen.
I think you're right that there would be plenty of hiring managers out there who don't realize how the recommendation part works. So let's say your student figures it out and what the process is you send them a little internal note that says, Chris would like a recommendation. Could you fill this out? That student may need to, outside of LinkedIn, give that recommender a heads up on how to do it. Go look at their LinkedIn profile, find the thing. Yeah. Teaching a person how to do that might be a requirement. I've had that happen. An older person who hired me to do bunches of projects could not figure out how to do it, and I had to walk her through it. I mean, she was kind enough, and we had that kind of relationship. So something to think about if your students come across either LinkedIn Luddites or just unable to figure it out, that they'll have to teach their recommenders. Good point. So here's a little thing I found yesterday. It's just an article about you can see at the bottom, 4 keys to scoring amazing LinkedIn recommendations. It's a little bit outdated because, as we all know, LinkedIn changed a lot last year, right?
Yep.
But it still applies. I would recommend this article at the bottom to all of you. And that'll be part of the video. You could grab it from there. But in there, the author said, don't have them ask 10 people all at once to write recommendations, because a hiring manager is going to be able to see that all happened at once. I'm not exactly sure how, but they'll figure it out. And it could give the wrong impression of, I forgot to give recommendations along the way. This would become more important as a person goes out into the work world and changes jobs after a few years. So I would say, encourage your current students to get a couple of the older ones that they might get, maybe a high school job supervisor type thing, get that taken care of now, and then maybe another one in a few weeks. And then as they work towards graduation, then get the more recent ones done. That was just what I came up with after reading that article yesterday, but I recommend that to you, the article. Yeah. Any questions about that?
Quick question for a student who's graduating. How many recommendations would you recommend? Like 2 to 4?
You know,
more is better?
yeah, you know, I would, rather than go with quantity, I'd go with quality.
Mhm.
You know, so don't get a recommendation from that job you held for 2 weeks.
Right.
But make sure you've got quality ones. I would think 3 or 4 would be a good book to shoot for. And that
Okay.
they're quality experiences, and obviously no one's going to give you a bad recommendation, or you don't have to show one that's bad. But yeah, 3 or 4 is going to do it.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, Chris, this is Gloria. Two questions. One, is it possible with LinkedIn to eliminate those older recommendations that you may not need once you have really solid, good ones that pertain to the field you want to go into?
Yeah, you can eliminate all the recommendations, any and all recommendations at any time. It's in the settings, and then you're editing the sections, I think is what it's called.
Okay.
Remind me when we get to the end, and maybe we can find that live on my profile. But yeah, real easy to get rid of those. And in fact, yeah, that's a good thought. I would do that. Get rid of the high school jobs once you have a few out of college jobs, if that's the case. Yeah.
Then my other question is there a way to, I see things sometimes where there are endorsements, but it's not the stuff that you want endorsed.
Yeah.
Can you do that as well? Get rid of the endorsements or certain topics?
Yeah. Oh, you know, what a good question. Let's figure that out. I would like to get rid of my endorsement section totally.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry I didn't investigate that to see if it was possible. Because I think I said this, I get people endorsing me for stuff they have no clue about what I even mean, and they have no experience with me, and I just don't like them. I'm going to assume that section can be hidden, but let's look at that at the end as well.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, and if we don't solve it today, let's solve it together afterwards. Wow. So when we started talking about doing this online consult, there are a lot of questions about where do projects and media and sample publications appear, or where should they appear in the profile, right?
Yes.
Anybody want to say a few words about that? What kinds of challenges have you seen and questions you get from students?
The thinking is that employers are looking at the LinkedIn profile pretty quickly, so they're probably most likely looking at the summary, education, and experience.
Yes.
And maybe then they're scrolling down to the bottom, and maybe then they're clicking on the projects. And the projects that section doesn't allow you, it allows you to put in a URL, but it doesn't allow you to upload. So the thinking was, if it's related to their career interests, that projects and any kind of experience like that should go into either the experience section or in the text box of the education section.
Yes. Okay, so I feel your pain, and it seems to be such an important aspect to include, yet it is rather hidden to the viewer of the profile. And I have not come up with a definitive way to do that. And the first questions I got in the emails, my thought is to include it everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
It in the experience section, if it relates to the job, have a project or attached document or something like that, publication right there in experience, and include it in the activities, and included in the projects section, which is a section you can add, which I can only hope is they're going to be viewed by a hiring manager who is very, very serious about that candidate. So there is, I think, hope that they'll be seen. But to get it up there at the top before the hiring manager loses interest is a challenge, I think. I've just repeated what you just said. But here is something I've done. I have, because my background is writing and editing and publications and such, I have, 5,000 lineal feet of examples I could give you. And so I did create a whole separate website really, that contains my best samples. And when you're on my LinkedIn profile, if you have the patience to click through to the section that says my websites are, and on the top there is my business website, Halverson New Media. That probably won't apply to many of your students. And the second one there is a link to my favorite sample publications ever. And you might have students where that would be worthwhile to do, to have them build a separate website that contains all their samples. A photographer, a journalist, or these health sciences students, if they're putting up medical posters, I believe is the term, right? Or doing presentations, they should include those things. Now, all of the profiles you sent me did have one or two projects associated with it. I think they were great and hard to see, hard for the viewer to find. So I think you're going to have to add to your bag of tricks, encouraging those students to do whatever they can to bring attention to those projects or samples that they've attached through other means, like what I did with this second website, or in the cover letter, or in the summary. Be sure to look at my projects. I don't know, what do you all think about that?
Oh, that's a good idea.
That's a good idea.
That in the summary, call attention to sections lower down on the LinkedIn profile is another way
Yes,
of directing them.
yeah, and pulling
Oh.
out the titles, if it's a presentation such, the effect of
Okay.
lemons or whatever, you know, to pull out the titles of those projects somewhere in that way high up where it makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like, and the issue of repeating it, like when we're doing resumes, we're basically saying don't be repetitive in sections, but it sounds like it's not a concern with LinkedIn profile if you have things more than one place, the same thing in more than one place.
Right, and I think it would serve the student well to repeat it.
Okay.
And that just has to do with the way LinkedIn is currently formatting these things. Probably that's all going to change at some point again.
Great.
So that's the best advice I can give, is to do it early and often.
Okay.
Early and often. Yeah, and think about this separate site type thing. My separate site is actually built on a blog platform, which all your students know how to do that in their sleep. So,
Yeah.
All right. So this was just to show you, just to remind you, when you're building a profile, you can tell it to add sections like all of these that we see over on the right. So projects is there. I think all of your samples that you sent me had a project section. I'm not sure. They definitely had a courses section. So that's just in case you need a reminder of where to do that. Okay, any questions about that?
No.
No.
Any of your students have patents yet?
No.
I did see several profiles had certification section. That's really great in this context. That was wonderful that they had found that and added it. So that was kind of, that's the bulk of what I wanted to say about the profile in general and the elements to watch out for. And then I just came across some ideas that perhaps you haven't thought of and maybe you should be aware of as you advise students. But I don't want to get too far away from what I've already said. Any questions about recommendations or profile photos at this point?
I was, Amanda, you're there.
Yes.
Any thoughts from your vantage point?
No, I think this has been really helpful because we've created it as a class assignment and had sort of a rubric, like include this in your summary. But I think what I've learned is really letting them be creative and more using creative language rather than technical, I want to be a nurse, those kinds of things. The big thing, and she went over this, is we had our students all show at least one of their projects, and we had an issue trying to figure out where to include that, because in the actual project section, you can't link to upload a PowerPoint or PDF. So as you noticed in the profiles, they were in the beginning, and it looked cluttered. So I think in talking to Louise, we figured out maybe putting it as experiential educational learning as one of the first things that is seen and describe it like they would on their resume and link to it. But I think that was our only really big issue this time around.
Sounds like you came up with a great workaround.
Yeah.
Let's just all just blame LinkedIn. It's a poor presentation.
And I did notice the other thing you guys were talking about endorsements is I noticed a lot of my students getting their parents to endorse them. And so there is a way to undo if you've been endorsed. You can hide them. You can toggle and hide what you want to be endorsed. Because I was noticing they'd have their boyfriends or their parents endorse them. And so it was very obvious because it was the same last name. So we're working on that as well.
Oh, good for you, Amanda. That's great. It never even occurred to me that people would have their parents endorse.
When you have a name like Georgia's,
Yeah.
it's a relative.
And that would be really bad if your parents didn't endorse you, right?
Right, yeah, that too.
Well, that's good. So, Amanda, it was fairly easy to hide endorsements that you didn't want.
Yeah, I think I worked on it with one student and we were able to figure it out.
Excellent. Okay. Yep. That's good to know. So I'm going to go do that after we hang up.
Yeah, I was just looking at that too, and there's a way to, you can actually delete what you have and then say, I don't want to request endorsements.
Oh, thank you.
So you can't just not show, at least I couldn't find a way to just not show what you have, but
Yep.
you can delete them individually.
Ah,
So, but I do have a question. This is Karen.
yes.
So there was a comment on, about Colton that he had, some photography.
Yeah.
On his site. And so I've worked in the field of nutrition, so I'm coming at this with a little bit of, I think this might apply to other situations too, that there may be some jobs that he would apply for where they would include something around, having to market or having to do some promotion or having to make handouts or things like that, where the sort of artistic skills, the photography skills may be beneficial. But sort of where I'm segueing with that is, when you're sending in a resume to a specific job, you can tailor it to a specific job.
Yes.
But this has got to kind of cover everything. So if we have students with sort of varied interests, I guess I'm just sort of thinking like how they may be applying to different kinds of jobs, and how do they cover all that? Should they just go big and include everything, or how do they tailor that down to what they may want to do the most?
Yeah, Karen, I don't know what the definitive answer is to that, but that was the impression I got from Collins was, wow, that's really cool. He's a good photographer. And then I said, but what does it have to do with nutrition?
Yeah, and I didn't look at his
Yeah.
individually. I looked at a couple of them.
Yeah. And I think he has the potential to just build that in better to his profile.
Well, and to his summary, because we've worked with Colton quite a bit, and I know he's looking at doing something that's kind of within the area of nutrition, kind of health promotion related. He's from northern Vermont, and I believe he's looking at a nonprofit up there in the Burlington area. And it's something about public health, and so getting information out there. And so images would be a really important part of that. So maybe he can include that somehow in his summary of combining his creative capabilities with his focus on nutrition and public health.
Yes, that was the sentence that was missing. He said, I learned photography and journalism, but he didn't say, and therefore, wouldn't it be great to use that? I would love to use that in my future job or something like that.
Check that out in my project.
That'd be a good.
Yeah.
Right, and then check that out in my project section. Yes.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and what to do with the idea of, okay, so let's say he doesn't apply to that job and decides he's going to try for just a nutritionist at the hospital, and he's creating menus for people. Then what do you do with that photography thing? I don't know. I think an employer would be fine with seeing it, but just slightly confused. So he must handle it with the cover letter or the application process.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that's challenging stuff. Multi-talented people are a problem.
Those are our students.
Those darn students, so
Darn.
talented and
And
creative.
so many interests.
You taught them so well. Darn it. Yeah. Anything else on those first big chunks of the profile?
No, that's great.
I have a question about what's up on the screen right now, and I don't know if you're going to talk about this, but one of our students liked a recipe on their webpage, and now when you look at her profile, the first thing that comes up is this recipe for ham soup or something. Is there a way to get rid of or make those go away?
Yeah, that is in fact a point of this slide here, Amanda. I was noticing it myself related to me. So the way LinkedIn is now structured, people are posting to LinkedIn much like they do to Facebook. There'll be a status update about, the latest project, the latest data about social media use in marketing or whatever. And I'll go like that, and then it'll be the first thing showing when you visit my profile. My audience shouldn't have to care what I've done over there, but there it is,
Yeah.
front and center. And so until I determine there's a way to hide that activity, and I'm going to bet that there is, I would caution students to be mindful of what they're doing on LinkedIn, what activities they have. So let's say they are following somebody who happens to post a bunch of political stuff and they keep liking or commenting. That could reflect badly on them depending upon the point of view of the hiring manager, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah. Have you heard of employers raising a concern about that, or students realizing what they've done and wondering how to fix it?
To date,
Not on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Not on LinkedIn, and probably because it's relatively new that this is so visible to people. So again, I think I would just behoove all of us to be aware of that and something to say to the students. If you happen to be that active in LinkedIn that you're liking and commenting on others people's stuff, know that the default setting is that others will see that. And to go through, let's add that to our list when we go live, to see if we can turn that off.
Okay.
sure.
Or just caution your students along the way, but we'll see if we can turn it off, okay? Similarly, I'm betting that not a one of your students would be using LinkedIn in that way to put up their own comments or own status update in LinkedIn. Because most of my adult advisees are not doing that, and people don't realize they could.
I could see them getting confused though, and they're so programmed on how Facebook works.
Yes.
And this whole redesign was to be more like Facebook. So I could see how there could be some confusion around it.
We
Yeah.
have a
We have a student right here.
Diana.
Student perspective.
And Diana has posted.
Yeah, I have. I think people do post some things that aren't always toward what they're trying to get a job for, but I think people do post and share on LinkedIn.
And Diana's posts have been, because you want to do marketing.
Mhm.
And your posts have been specific to marketing.
Yeah.
So that seems like that's been a good use of the
That-
feed.
And that would be exactly what I tell people who come to my workshops, adults who are running their own small business. If their small business is related to marketing, yes, they should be posting about and commenting on things related to marketing. It's very good that you're doing that. Was it Diana? Sorry.
Yes.
Yes.
No. If that's the field you're going into and you're commenting and or liking and or posting your own things, that's good activity. You won't confuse a hiring manager who's going to see that activity, and I'm assuming won't annoy them or whatever, give them reason to not think of you as a potential hire. But I could see people, as Bev said, being confused and going, oh, I've got to comment on that political statement over here, or I'm going to argue with this person about whatever. Or just the simple fact that you mentioned the recipe coming up first. I could see the hiring manager going, why is this person showing me recipes instead of showing me their, because the hiring manager may not have savvy in that regard. So something to be aware of. So let's put that on our list of when we go live. We'll see if we can manipulate that in some way on the way the profile shows. Here's and then so another topic entirely. As I was going through the student profiles, the 9 ones that you sent me, I noticed several of them had very, very long, what I think of as long-term employment or volunteer positions, like 3 or 4 years worth. And my first thought was, wow, for students people that age, that's astonishing, isn't it? I mean, you tell me, you're the experts in career counseling, but to the ones that I saw, I thought they really needed to somehow capitalize on that long-term experience that they had. Say more about it, or wax philosophical about why I stayed with that position for so long, or why I keep working for cancer care or whatever. Tell me what you think about that. Is it unusual to have a 3 or 4 year term at something?
It's not
really.
that unusual.
It's not.
No.
That's okay. So that shows me. Yeah.
But that's interesting about the idea of writing is
About the commitment.
about the
Yeah, I
commitment
think
as a
that's good.
statement versus it just repeating the resume to say, I've stayed with this because I'm committed to, or I hadn't thought about that, but that's really,
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that
think
would
so.
be
I mean,
great.
that was something, so as someone who, I used to be the director of the dietetic internship here, which is postgraduate.
Okay.
And so I would look directly at the applications. And that was something that I would notice, you know, like, is this someone who, you know, suddenly realized in the summer after their junior year that they need more experience and they quickly volunteered for a whole bunch of places very short time, or are they someone who showed that they volunteered again and again for the same, you know, that they had the consistency and commitment over a period of time. And often you would see a you know, an elevation in their an advancement in their responsibilities, and sometimes a higher into a paid position. So those are things that I would really look at as beneficial. And so I think other, you know, employers would too,
Yeah.
probably.
Mhm.
And so I think it would bear highlighting.
Yeah, thank you. I had that response to a few that looked like somebody said, well, you better spend your summer volunteering, and they had 3 or 4 in one summer, which says to me, yep, they're trying to fill out the resume, as it were. But the long-term ones really stuck out for me, and I wanted to know more about, yes, did they advance, or did they just get so passionate about that topic area that they're going to stay with it forever? I think that maybe you should encourage them all to tell the story behind that rather than just the data. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, I worked for 4 years at this place. I want to know why.
Yeah.
Adults don't do that much. Probably in health groups they do, but these days, not too much. But that was just something, a miscellaneous thing that I noticed. And this is just another comment, you know, so as these seniors are launched out into the world and narrowing down where they're going to work, I'm hoping that you have encouraged them to use the company profiles that can be found on LinkedIn to research those companies.
Yes.
Yes.
And actually, we have a student intern who's helping us with the career and internship fair, and it was her suggestion that on the directory, not only there be a LinkedIn URL for the company, but she's going to be researching the LinkedIn URLs for the recruiters and adding those into the directory.
Excellent. Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah. So I find the company profiles, the companies that are on there, researching about them is can be very helpful no matter what you're trying to do. Get a job or earn their, as a contractor or whatever, just learn who they're connected to there. Please ignore the typo I have here, companies. Wrong plural, okay. But it's a great tool, and a lot of people will miss that. So good on you for pointing that out to folks. That was the end of my miscellaneous. So I'm gonna go back to the beginning here. Should we go live to a profile and see if we can do a few things?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, one other question for you, skills. We've been telling students to use as many skills as possible, both the combination of the hard and the soft.
Yep.
And I'm assuming that's what we should be doing.
Oh, absolutely. And that was another question you had sent me via email. Yeah, the hard and the soft. And I think whoever said it was right. They don't do enough of that. It's important to be specific. I learned Excel spreadsheets, but also important the soft skills. Absolutely. And again, in a narrative sort of storytelling form would be great.
Okay.
Another
Yeah.
question, maybe you have a suggestion. It used to be that they had a menu that you could choose from, and so it kind of prompted people to think about their skills.
Yes.
And the redesign now is that you on your own have to think about your skills. And I find it's really hard for students to just get going on that. So
Yep.
then I bring up stuff like leadership or collaborative, teamwork or communication, some of like the basics. Is there any sort of best practice, or it can be very daunting if you're 21 years old and you're like, I have no idea what skills I have. It's hard for me to even like that drop down menu now that, you have to start typing before things will pop up.
Yep. No, I agree, Bev. The design is not helpful any longer in that regard. I'm with you totally. Pardon me while I'm trying to get to live. What are you seeing at this moment?
Your face. Hi.
Hi. Just my face. I'm trying to get it to reduce itself so I can get you to the many profiles I have open. I'm going to stop sharing at the moment.